Good. Are you guys sore from working out? Because I started working out with Sandra like 3 weeks ago. And this whole thing that we're doing this week, oh my God. You know how Sarah always says, like, don't do your work, don't do this, and don't do this, and she tells you what not to do? I always joke with her and tell her that I'm the most uncoordinated worker-outer ever, because I look at like that, but just not as cute as what she looks like doing it. So, but I wanted to share with you a little bit more about myself. I'm the baby of 5. I have 3 older sisters and 1 older brother. And so at a really young age, I saw, everybody being pretty independent. My oldest sister is 45 years old, so there's a really big gap in between us. My mom says my brother was the prize and I was the surprise. So, so I was really independent at a young age. I'd wake up in the morning, I'd make myself cereal, get myself dressed. Sometimes my mom wouldn't even be up and I'd be out the door to school. But the one thing I noticed is that I'd get to school and I'd be hungry, like as soon as the bell rang. And so I'm like, well, it's probably because I'm eating Frosted Flakes for breakfast. So I was like, well, I'm just gonna learn how to cook. So first thing I learned how to cook was eggs. So I'd make myself 2 eggs and toast every morning. I learned from Alton Brown. And my dad, actually, I'd start making him breakfast, but he would make this awesome bologna and cheese sandwich that I love. And like now I think about it, I'm like, ew, I ate bologna like all the time. Why would I do that to myself? But so since I began to cook, I started to be more mindful of what I was putting into my body. And my mom would usually make dinner, which was basically fish sticks from a box and some applesauce. And so I was like, whoa, that's not really cooking. And so I started looking at the box and I'm like, what's sodium benzoate? And so my mom's like, oh, it's to keep it fresh. And I'm like, well, why do you have to add something to keep the food fresh? Like you shouldn't do that. You should just be eating fresh food. So I took it upon myself to just start reading cookbooks and educating myself. I know a lot of people say like, oh, you can't really learn to cook from watching TV, but Alton Brown does a really good job. Like he has little models of the scientific things that go on when you cook. So I learned a lot from him. When I first started cooking, it was in middle school. I started taking a cooking class, and that's where I learned the importance of cooking, and I started learning about processed foods, and I realized, well, that is exactly what my mom is feeding me. So around that time, I took it upon myself to start cooking for my family, and at the time, it's like 5 or 6 people that I was cooking for every night at like 13 years old. And I would make shopping lists for my dad, and be like, okay, we need to go to the store. And he'd drop me off, give me his card, and I'd shop for my entire family. And I thought it was really empowering because I had my dad's credit card. So the single most important thing that I learned through cooking and through going to my cooking class in school is how important cooking was. And so our American society has slowly started to abandon our kitchens and to allow the food industry to pretty much make it for us, right? And the more widely available processed foods are, the more people start to rely on it, kind of like enabling, right? So we now live in a culture where we watch more cooking on TV than spend actually cooking. And today's chefs are as famous as actors and singers. And so like I said, you're filming this right now? Food Network star is gonna call me. So I feel like cooking is something that a lot of people kind of take for granted now. And so let me ask you guys a question. How many of you guys like to cook? Well, that's good, okay. Well, anthropologists say that cooking is a defining human activity. Let me just repeat that. Cooking is a defining human activity. It's what separates us from every other mammal on this planet. I think that is so fascinating. And so there's a food hypothesis which says the advent of food altered the course of human evolution. So when we began to cook, it allows our bodies to process it more easily. And we were creating food which was more calorically dense, which allowed our brains to grow. And think about it, animals chew for like 6 hours a day. Think of like a little panda munching on bamboo shoots, or like a cow grazing on grass. So being able to cook freed up a lot of time in our day, which allowed us to, start creating a culture, start, having conversations probably the floor. They probably didn't have tables back then, but, talking about things, talking about food, learning how to communicate with one another. And all of this was centered around the fact that we can cook. And so the importance of cooking not only goes back to, like religious roles of like sacrificial ritual of like blessing an animal and slaughtering it and then eating it, but also the scientific factor of it is that even our gut microbiome changed from the fact that we now cook food. And the science behind it all, also it's like the fermentation factor of food, kimchi, the process of baking bread, stuff like that. So there's so much more to cooking than, who's gonna be the next winner on Top Chef or what recipe you have this week in your Blue Apron box. Cooking not only transformed us as a species, but it also our cultures. I believe that our society today has not only lost their sense of direction in the kitchen, but they kind of lost their sense of self. We think that a simple pill is going to fix my inflammation, or these magic diets will all of a sudden make me lose weight. The one thing that anybody needs to change is just to cook your food. See what's going in your body, seeing it change from this fresh snow pea on our table to, a sautéed delicacy with no salt, and some pepper on it. It's delicious. There's nothing more gratifying than creating a meal and waiting for it to be finished, watching your family be like, oh my God, I'm so hungry, and pulling it out of the oven, and then serving it to your family, and watching them take that first bite, and like going, oh, it tastes so good. Like, that's my favorite part. And to me, like, that's my favorite part and the most important part of the whole thing. So the importance of cooking could be different for everybody, but to me, the importance of cooking comes from the fact that this is a really good line, everybody. I'm really excited to say this for you. So the importance of cooking for me comes from the fact that when we learn to cook is when we became truly human. And I will put on my gloves so we can start. Have you guys worked with tofu before? Have you guys? No? Yes. Chefy. Okay. Well, so I like to use, for anything, like if you're gonna bake tofu or saute it, I like to use extra firm, obviously because it's extra firm and it's not gonna fall apart on you. And did you know that America, like the United States, produces over half the amount of soybeans for the world? Isn't that kind of cool? I think that's pretty cool. Okay. You're always gonna wanna press your tofu because it is sitting in water the whole time. So you're gonna wanna take it out. And then you're gonna wanna wrap it in a couple layers of paper towels or flour cloths. You can get flour cloths at Walmart for like $5 and they're amazing. You can line them in bread baskets. You can use them to cover your bread when it's rising if you guys wanna make bread. So you're gonna wanna wrap it. So a couple layers of paper towels, and you can easily just do it on a plate, and you're gonna wanna press it. And for me, I always fill up my tea kettle and do that. But sometimes I like to get fancy pants And I put a colander in a big bowl and put that in there. Use my tea kettle trick again. Boom, and then press it, because most of the time you get like a collection of water underneath here, and you kind of have to dump it every so often. So this kind of just kind of helps. And I don't have a lot of plates because I live in a tiny home, so these are useful. But so normally you're gonna want to press your tofu for like 30 minutes at least to get all the water out. Yes, is it on? Yay, okay. Cool. So we're gonna learn how to dry fry tofu, and it's the most magical thing in the world, and it's also the most easiest thing you could do to tofu, which allows it to get a really nice crust on it. So you're gonna wanna get your pan really, really, really nice and hot. You don't wanna put any oil in there or water. It's obviously a dry fry. And you don't wanna like put it in there. Oh, it's actually hot enough. I was gonna say you don't wanna put it in there and you're not gonna hear anything, but it's hot enough now. So I simply do a little bit of salt, a little bit of pepper. In this case, I used a little bit of the no salt because we're gonna put some liquid aminos. I'm gonna show you how to make a little dressing. And so you don't want it to be too salty. So when you put it in the pan, you wanna hear this. Just like that. It's gonna start to cool the pan down. So I'm gonna turn it up. Okay, so, and then you just leave it. Leave it for a little bit to kind of let the temperature of your pan come up a little bit, because it always drops when you put something cold in there. And then I'll tell you what to do next, and you'll end up hearing what I told you about the lobster sounds. It's actually kind of cool. So while this is going, you always want to, when you cook, you always want to be doing two things at once. You don't want to just want to stand here and like watch your tofu, because that's pretty damn boring. So you guys should have a recipe in front of you, and this is my go-to quick, easy saute sauce. I use rice wine vinegar, mirin, and liquid aminos. If you guys haven't had this, replace your soy sauce in your pantry with this. It's amazing. It has 16 out of the 20 amino acids that your body needs right here, and amino acids is what like helps build your muscles. And we all need that because we're working out with Sandra and we're getting buff, you know? Okay. So in there it has the measurements. It's like 1/4 cup of mirin, 1/4 cup of rice wine vinegar. So I have it all mise en place right here. Super easy, quick. Throw it in a mason jar. Mason jars are your best friend. Throw it all in there. And then for the spice, I like to use gochujang. It's just a hot, sweet chili sauce. If you put this in anything, and it will completely awaken your dish. It's spicy, but it's not like that jalapeno spicy where you're like, ah, you know? It's like a very warm, spicy, and it doesn't really get any more intense. So I like to use a little bit more, you know? You just wanna kind of break it up. I think in there I didn't add garlic into my thing, but you can always add some garlic, some ginger if you want in here. And I didn't plan on stirring it with a fork, but I did anyway. So then you just shake it up. Okay, it's done. Boom. That was easy. And then, so now that our tofu is going, you want to press it. So it does this. You hear how it goes? So you're supposed to let it fry for like 3 to 4 minutes on each side, because you want it to get a nice crust, so it kind of looks like that. Let's see if these are ready yet. I don't think, has it been 3 to 4 minutes? What do you guys think? I don't think it's been 3 to 4 minutes. It could go a little longer. Let's let it go a little longer. So I wrote down these really fun facts of liquid aminos and some tofu for you guys. Obviously, Liquid aminos doesn't contain wheat, so it's gluten-free. And it's also not fermented. So people who are like, I can't have alcohol, this is for them. Obviously, it's made from soybeans. And let's see. I have so many facts about tofu. I got really nerdy with looking up all these fun facts about tofu. Henry Ford actually developed plastic from soybeans and used it starting in 1935 to do the frames for his cars. Isn't that cool? I think that's pretty cool. Okay, I think that bought me a little bit of time. All right. So again, you just flip it, do the same thing. Non-stick pans are your best friend. A lot of people don't like this copper pan. They say like, oh, it's not good. I like it. It works. Well, it does really well for me, actually. So it's pretty cool. So sometimes the tofu like actually like bounces in here because of all like it steams and it like moves around the pan a little bit. So it's kind of cool. Isn't that so satisfying? Yes. Mirin is like a sweet rice seasoning. It contains a little bit of alcohol, like 8%. I mean, you don't want to get drunk off this, obviously. But, yeah, right next to the rice vinegar. I love it. Super yummy. That actually would probably make a really yummy drink. If you put some mirin in there, I don't know. Maybe I'm being a little bit too cray-cray. Okay, so let's let these bad boys kind of sit here. But also, so like, these can sit here and keep frying, and you don't really have to move them. I'm just kind of moving them out of the way. Let's add some onions in there. And some mushies. Let's do some mushies too. Just kind of let those hang out. It's taking a little bit longer than I expected. Just saying. What else can I tell you fun facts about tofu? It's one of the oldest foods in the entire world. It's actually very ancient. And it's kind of like tofu is to soy milk as milk is to cheese. Isn't that kind of cool? I like that saying. There's a couple, so like I was just talking to Blair about this. So when I was reading, I learned that tofu is made with soy milk and a little bit of a coagulant, and then it makes curds, and then those curds are kind of pressed down into the little blocks. But you were saying something different. That you could find sprouted tofu, which is, yes.
So I've only seen it at Vitamin Cottage or Natural Grocers, but you can get sprouted soybean tofu. So essentially what they do is, instead of just using the soybean as it is, they sprout it first. And so when you're eating a live food, like sprouted grains or sprouted anything, it actually has more nutrient density, and your stomach and everything can break it down easier. So it's easier digested, and you're absorbing even more nutrients. Regular tofu is great too, but the sprouted stuff is just a little extra on the enzymes.
A little extra. So we're gonna add in our snap peas. I love these things. They're so good. Kind of let those sit in there. Did you know that when ladies are in their menopause time, so when you're in your menopause time, your estrogen just kind of goes like that. And tofu actually has phytoestrogens, and which actually can alleviate some of the symptoms of menopause. I thought that was kind of fancy. Also, it helps flush out toxins. So it's also really good for your gut, and it helps you lose weight because it helps. How do I say this? It helps you like shed water and prevents bloating. I thought that was kind of fancy. I feel like I need to eat tofu every day. Okay, so now these are all nice. The onions are starting to become a little bit translucent. The Mushrooms are starting to get nice and brown, starting to shrink a little bit. The snow peas, like I like to put in my liquid right now. So do you see the color difference of like how green this guy is versus how light this guy is? So that's when I like to add my liquid. And my tofu is nice and browned on both sides. So we're gonna add a little bit of this gloriousness. Brought her. Just a little bit. You don't need a lot of it. Let's throw in some garlic in there just because I have it mise en place from yesterday. Let's throw that in there too. So how long, this is what, been like 10 minutes? Just think about it. Your dinner can be made in 10 minutes because it's done. And Sarah, can you bring me a plate, please? Yes. And I have plenty of this for everybody if you guys want to like come and make it, if you want me to make it for you. I figured you guys would be a little bit hungry. I could turn this down a little bit. Let's add a little bit more of this because tofu absorbs every flavor that you put onto it. So like right now, it like nicely got absorbed in already. It goes, does that. So this is gonna be very flavorful. You guys can do this, right? Dry fried tofu, it's not that hard, right?
Delicious.
I know, it looks so yummy. Who wants to eat? Yes? Okay. And tofu, so tofu is made from soybeans, and soybeans are the only vegetable that contains a complete protein, like meat. Isn't that fascinating? I think I get really nerdy when I talk about food. So you guys are like, yeah, it's cool. I'm like, it's so cool. So and that's it. That's all I have for you guys. Who's hungry? It smells good, doesn't it? Who wants to eat first? Don't all jump up at once. Well, I'm just going to continue making this. I have plenty of tofu for everyone. And there's forks and knives and spoons. This should be good.